Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
One of the most mysterious and perplexing sites here in the United States is called the Serpent Mound. It's in southern Ohio. Imagine my surprise while looking at Google Earth the other day, while working on our upcoming travelogue or video documentary of our trip to Israel recently, looking at Gilgal Refaim, which is one of the most spectacular sites we saw during our tour, and discovered what looks like a very similar megalithic structure in Israel. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining me is a gentleman who I have to give credit for actually finding this, because my first thought was to jump online and see if anyone else has discovered this spectacular thing. And of course, someone had, and he's also been a previous guest here on this program. He's the author of the book Giants, Sons of the Gods, among others. He's a pastor, Reformed Baptist Church of Northern Colorado. You find him online at dougvandorn.com. We welcome to the program, once again, Doug Van Dorn. Doug, welcome back.
Thanks, Derek. I'm excited about this one.
And an expert in the field of biblical giantology, which is a narrow field at this point. But I think when we start discussing what where our thoughts are leading here, we may get some new interest in this. He's the author of Interview with the Giant, Ethno-Historical Notes on the Nephilim Dossier. He's the director of the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, and you find him online at tioba.org. His personal website, burtonbeyond.com. Our friendly neighborhood PhD, Dr. Judd Burton. Judd, welcome back.
My spidey sense is tingling.
This was really intriguing because, Sharon and I have an interest in odd stuff, weird stuff, paranormal stuff, but we try to stay within the bounds of where biblical theology will let us go. We don't want to sensationalize stuff just for the sake of attracting attention to ourselves. That doesn't serve our Lord and Savior. But when I showed Sharon the Google Earth satellite view of the area right around Gilgal Refaim, I said, look just north of there. She said, oh my gosh, that's a serpent. It looks like the Serpent Mound. I said, yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. And so then I started looking to see if anyone else had discovered this, because, yeah, hey, being the first one would be kind of cool. But lo and behold, Doug Van Dorn already wrote about it in his book 6 years ago. So kind of late to the party here. Doug, how did you stumble across this thing?
Yeah, so I had been reading a bunch of Michael Heiser stuff, and
as do we all. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I've been reading a bunch of his stuff and learning about how Bashan in Ugarit, it means the place of the serpent, and a whole bunch of other things that are kind of related. And I had heard about this place called the Wheel of the Giants that was really old, and I think I had probably just been back from the Ohio Serpent Mound myself. I got to visit that back in like 2010. So this is right around the time I'm writing the book. And for whatever reason, I got on Google Earth and I started looking just at different places. And it's exactly what you saw. Like all of a sudden, my eyes opened up. I mean, this thing is 1/10 of a mile north of the wheel. It's right there. And I couldn't believe what I saw. So called up a friend who I've been talking about all this stuff with. And I said, man, you got to go to Google Earth right now. Where am I going? Go to the wheel. All right, he goes to the wheel. I said, what do you see? I said, it's really close by, an exact same thing. It took him 10 seconds. He goes, man, that's a serpent.
Yeah.
It's a serpent mound.
Now, Judd, we of course, Doug contacted you yesterday after I reached out to Doug and said, hey, I found this thing and I see that you've already found it. How long have you known about this and what is your sense of this thing?
Well, Doug brought it to my attention a couple of years ago, and I just encouraged him to stay on top of it. And when he told me he was going to check it out for himself, I just said, be sure and take lots of pictures from different angles and, jot down your observations. It's pretty, I say that it's hard to miss. It's sort of hiding in plain sight unless you're actually looking at the topography. You can't mistake it. I mean, it looks like a slithering serpent. Given its proximity to the Hermon region and everything that's associated with that culturally, going back to the Watchers and the Giants, and of course the kingdom of Og, Bashan. You're talking about the same sections of reused sacred space, so there's definitely something going on here. And given the fact that there are tumuli from different, at different strata, I think that's very significant.
Now, for listeners who may not be familiar with the term, what are tumuli?
Well, they're it's basically a fancy word for graves that are tended. In other words, it's not just a hole in the ground. It's something that you probably run across in the research for your last book, Derek, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. Which all sorts of rites for the dead are called for. So basically, there's a ceremonial aspect beyond just the initial, the initial entombment, if you will.
So a sort of a megalithic funerary monument.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
The thing that startled me is that, Doug, as you mentioned, it's 1/10 of a mile from Gilgal Refaim, and we were there back in May, and so we had to drive right past this Serpent Mound. Had no idea what we were looking at because you can't really see it from ground level.
So yeah, I was just there at the end of July.
So you went there yourself and went to the mound.
I did. So it was cool because I felt like I'm the first person ever walking on this thing in modern times, not looking at the burial mounds. Like I'm looking at the bigger picture, this giant serpent mound from the top. And when I got up there, I'm not an archaeologist or anything, and I was kind of taking some directions like Judd told me to take, and I happened to be up there with our tour guide, who is also an archaeologist, and I'm standing on one of these giant piles of rocks, and he goes, "You know what you're standing on, don't you?" And I said, "I have no idea." And he goes, "Those are burial mounds." And as soon as he said it, I looked all over the top of this thing, and when you go on Google Earth, you can actually see them. And I didn't know what they were when I was looking at them on Google Earth. They kind of look like giant pockmarks and I thought maybe these were like rocket holes from the Six-Day War or something like that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But once you know what they are, they're completely obvious when you're looking on Google Earth. And what I noticed was it just totally stunned me. As I'm standing on top of this, you can see there's hundreds of them on top, it seems like. But when you look down below, as you're standing on this mound, that's probably, 20, 25 feet high. There's none of them on the ground below. Like there's none anywhere. They're only on top of the Serpent Mound. So when you sent me this picture from this article that you were looking at, they had actually gone through and archaeologists had marked where all of these mounds, these burial mounds are located. And you notice that they were right in the shape of the serpent.
Right.
And so I overlaid that map with the picture from Google Earth. And sure enough, it's exactly what I saw with my eyes. There's none in the region below. They're all on top of the mound. And maybe we can get in a little bit to some of the stuff with the idea of the dead and the importance of that with King Og and some of the Ugaritic stuff and the place of the serpent. It's really spooky and I think pretty significant for the area of Bashan itself.
Well, again, what led me to this, as I was looking at it, actually, I was not looking to try to orient the wheel with Mount Hermon, I was actually trying to find the directions from the gates. There are two entrances, gates, if you will, into the wheel, into this maze, Gilgal Refaim. And the scholars who wrote this paper, where I found that map that pointed out all of these burial locations and the clusters of them along this serpent-shaped ridge mound. The two gates appeared to be oriented toward extinct volcanoes on the horizon, both of which I believe are being used as observation posts by the IDF these days, not surprisingly. But that's when I noticed. I was, kind of pulling back. It's like, okay, northwest is that way, and holy Ned, what is that? So, but what's interesting is that when you do cite this to Mount Hermon, and I sent you both a picture, I think, of the view, a picture that I took. Actually, it was a still shot from a video, because I was trying to find Mount Hermon with the video, and I realized there's this small little hill in the foreground. It's like, again, didn't even know what that was, but obviously that is the mound. So the mound is directly between Gilgal Refaim and Mount Hermon on the distance. So you've got
directly.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's astonishing. So, Judd, the significance then, as Mike Heiser pointed out, Bashan in the Ugaritic dialect would be pronounced Bethan, which literally means place of the serpent.
Right.
What's the connection to this ancient region of Bashan? Why would this be relevant?
Well, for a number of reasons, including the fact that the name of the land, the name actually means land of the serpent or land of the serpents. But you've got all kinds of snake imagery that's ensconced in the culture of that area. Even to the east of the Hermon region, east of Bonius, was the old, an old section of land that was allotted to the apostate tribe of Dan, and Dan was often associated with serpents.
Yeah, that's right. He's
right.
The serpent tribe.
Yeah. Yep. So there are multiple layers of significance here. A case could probably also be made with a kind of relation with the Nakash or even the Seraphim, as the, I believe it's the Seraphim that have some of the lore associates sort of reptilian or dragon sorts of attributes to them. And so there are a number of connections that could definitely be made here, just with the serpent totem alone.
Hey, here's a couple of interesting quotes from Jewish pseudepigrapha on what you were just talking about. So one is from the Testament of Amram that they found at the Dead Sea Scrolls, and this is what it says. I saw watchers in my vision, the dream vision. Two men were fighting over me, saying, and there's a break in it, and then it continues, and holding the great contest over me, I asked them, who are you, that you are thus empowered over me? They answered me, we have been empowered to rule over all mankind. They said to me, which of us do you choose to rule you? I raised my eyes and looked. One of them was terrifying in his appearance, like a serpent, his cloak many-colored yet very dark. And I looked again, and in his appearance, his visage like a viper.
Mm-hmm.
And you find that kind of stuff not only in Israel, but like you find it in kind of the mythology of characters like Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl in South America. So,
and interesting too that in the Book of Enoch, one of the archangels, and I forget which one, is tasked with ruling over the scorpions and serpents. But I get, but the point is, given the context here, I wonder with the interchangeability in the Old Testament. Isaiah does it once, and I think in Numbers we see it again, where the Nachashim Seraphim,
right,
the flying fiery serpents, which is a pretty good way of describing a dragon, by the way. is used. So you've got this connection, this serpentine connection to, and of course the rebel in the Garden of Eden was called the Nakash, which is translated as serpent. So you've got this serpentine appearance connected to these old supernatural entities who were worshipped as gods, perhaps. And then there's this connection to this region, Bashan, which in the text from Ugarit was pretty clearly connected to the underworld. A couple of different texts, several different texts actually, two that connect the cities of Ashtaroth and Edrei to Molech, and then one that connects it to a god called Rapayu, the king of eternity. And Rapayu is just a singular form of Rephaim. Who and
this king of eternity is he's like he rules over Ashtaroth and Edrei,
right?
But what's so interesting is that in Scripture, that's exactly what Og the giant rules over. So there's like this parallel between Og and that particular king of Ugarit,
right?
And of course, Og then would be he would be a Nephilim, and he would be the son of a watcher and a human woman. So. And he's ruling over this very area. In fact, I came across something that said that somebody was calling the Wheel of Giants, they were calling it the Wheel of Og.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you know what that source was, Doug?
Yeah, I could find it. It was, I don't think that it was anything scholarly, although it might have been. It's a guy named Yuval Ne'iman, Tel Aviv University.
Oh,
and the title of his article is Astronomy in Israel from Og's Circle to the Wise Observatory.
Okay.
There's another connection with Og too, because in some of the etymologies of his name can mean circle. So that's exactly what you find in this strange wheel thing. It's like 5 concentric circles.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting now, and I'll trade you a copy of this paper that I found for that one, because I'd be very curious to read that. We plan to go back there next year, and next year we're definitely going up on the mound. But the paper that included that map that I sent to you was published in 2017. Michael Freakman and Naomi Porat, called Rujim El Hiri, which is the local name for Gilgal Refaim. I believe they're both scholars at the University of Tel Aviv, but it was published in a journal called Tel Aviv. No, I'm sorry, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and a Geological Survey of Israel. Those are the institutions the scholars are connected with. But a scholarly paper, and it is really intriguing as you dig into this, because they really... I think brought forward some better ideas than what had previously been seen. Again, by looking at the dating of the settlements that have been found nearby, which pushes the date of this further back than what scholars had previously thought. They also then, what did they call it? OSL dating, which is a type of dating. Let's see. Of looking at the lowest course of stones inside the central chamber, and looking at how the chemical changes in the rock had taken place over the years, some such thing. Basically, looking for archaeological material or organic material, rather, to get another method of dating besides carbon-14. And by so doing, they arrived at dates of the lowest construction stones inside the central chamber of between about 3080 and 2560 BC. And some of the dates that they got for some of the areas, that's basically it. I'm trying to summarize this on the fly. So about 3000 BC, give or take a couple hundred years, which pushes it a little further back than what previous scholars had thought. But it really raises some interesting points, because if you've got a civilization that's organized enough to coordinate putting together this thing out of 40,000 tons of stone, you've got a pretty organized civilization and a pretty powerful dude at the top of the pyramid there.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it speaks of the kind of infrastructure and engineering technology that you need to carry out something like that. And I and others have long held that, the Watchers and their progeny, whether before or after the flood, had a hand in making the earliest city-states happen.
Yeah, Judd, we were talking last night about what's the name of that old place up in Turkey?
Oh, Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah, Göbekli Tepe, and you were talking a little bit about possible Watcher relations to that, and that's one of the oldest cities that they've ever discovered.
I think so. I mean, it's not a city in the conventional sense, but it bears the hallmarks of. If we're to use those criteria to judge these settlements, then we have to, at the end of the day, we have to come to the conclusion that it does bear the mark of a civilization. It's something on the order of a holy city, though, like a Mecca or a Jerusalem. The interesting thing about Göbekli Tepe is that it's, as I've told my students before, it's the paradigm that shatters the paradigm, because scholars have long held that, agriculture was the basis for civilization, that it allowed the kind of sedentarism on a social level for the development of that kind of centralized infrastructure and specialization of labor, so forth. But all of that is agriculture is epiphenomenal at Göbekli Tepe. It's religion that draws people to that place in the first place to begin with. The agriculture comes later to feed the people that are actually doing the work, and the sort of skeleton priest crew that would live in the vicinity of the site during the course of the year.
That's really a mind-boggling concept. I mean, it sounds kind of dry when you hear it, but the implications of that are really huge. In other words, people went to the place because it was a holy spot, and then they had to feed themselves. So it wasn't that, hey, let's build our church here close to the farm. It's no, we need to put a farm over here because we got all these guys working on the on this holy site. And it looks like the same thing may have taken place at Gilgal Refaim. And I was mistaken in reading this table that the scholars included in here of their analysis of the sediment samples taken from Gilgal Refaim. They actually placing the construction of this at about 3750 BC, give or take.
I was thinking it was a little, which would put it square in the Chalcolithic. Yeah, right in the middle.
And what's even more interesting is that they found another low stone wall to the south and west of Gilgal Refaim that was buried, and it appears as though it had been dismantled to construct Gilgal Refaim. So there was something even older on this site that was dismantled to build this newer monument.
It's curious when you look at, now this is just legend, and so it's speculation and stuff like that, but in Jewish tradition, in the Old Testament, so Og is the contemporary of Moses, right? But if you go back in Jewish tradition, they've got Og living in the days of Abraham, and then, so that's, 400 years earlier or whatever, but then they also have, some of them have him living before the flood, and then so he survives the flood by basically hitching a ride on Noah's Ark, helping him build the ark or whatever. But the point is that they have this person of Og living way, way back in time, not just in the days of Moses.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some connections to Greek flood myths. There's a scholar from, and I forget where, out in the Pacific Northwest now, who connects him to Agagos, who is...
oh, yeah. Yep. I was reading about that today.
Yeah.
So I guess the idea would be that he would have been, this king over this area of Greece, and then he gets on the flood and survives through the flood, and I guess he lands in the area of Bashan and reestablishes it or something. I don't know.
Or the other way around, perhaps. Because the scholar Amar Anus wrote a paper that was mind-blowing for me. Back in 1999, this is even before his work on the Mesopotamian Watchers, the Apkallu. He wrote a paper in 1999, Were there Greek Rephaim? And it was a study on the etymology of a Greek phrase, moropes anthropoi, which is used by the poets Homer and Hesiod to describe the heroes who lived during the Golden Age when Kronos ruled in heaven. And he showed that the root behind moropes was the same root, RP ayin or whatever, that's behind Rephaim. So the heroes of the Greeks, the demigods, were just the Rephaim by different names. Mm-hmm. Which has some very interesting implications because if you just look at their myths and take them at face value, well, Hercules, okay, he's a demigod. That means by definition, he and Perseus and Bellerophon and Cadmus, all of those guys are Nephilim. But apparently the word that they used, or the phrases that they used, the Greek poets who wrote a lot of what we know about Greek religion, got the word from the same Semitic root that has come down to us through the Bible as Rephaim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Derek, you and I have talked rather extensively about the Orientalizing phenomenon, the influence that the East, that is the ancient Near East, had on the Greek world, and it's quantifiable in a couple of concentrated time periods, but it's the argument could be made and has been made in works like the Eastern Face of the Helicon is one of the works that I'm thinking of. But there's this steady stream of influence on the Aegean world from the ancient Near East. You know, they believe that a substantial number of their gods actually came from the East.
Mm-hmm. The thing that's, well, let's come back to the Serpent Mound here, because again, this is just such a fascinating discovery, and again, so close to Gilgal Refaim, and in this ancient land considered by people who lived around the ancient Israelites to be the entrance to the netherworld, a place where, Jesus wasn't all that far from here. A little to the northwest of there when he went to Caesarea Philippi and then climbed Mount Hermon for the Transfiguration. What would have been the significance? Scholars can only guess. They're not looking at this through a biblical lens typically, but what would be the significance of putting all of these burials on this mound shaped like a serpent in a land considered the entrance to the netherworld?
Mm.
So it depends maybe on who built it. Like if Og's the one who built it, you could have this direct connection possibly all the way back to the Watchers themselves, like directly, as in a father himself. But it certainly would be an idea of worship. The whole complex there, I think it's in that article that you were talking about, with the wheel itself seems to be a complex associated with the dead and the veneration of the dead, or who knows, maybe helping the dead cross over to the other side, or whatever the case might be. So, maybe there's some sort of an honoring of the Watchers themselves, or maybe praying to them of, in the form of making these giant monuments to, keep the dead in a good place, or whatever the case might be. I don't know.
I think that's a distinct possibility, given the priority that the Amorites gave to keeping their ancient kings or their dead ancient kings and ancient heroes happy and placated. Derek, you've written pretty extensively on that in this upcoming book that you've got. And in other places, and I think you articulate it really well. So I can't imagine that would not be part of the equation here.
Well, that would be my guess and my assessment based on what I've read. Again, the scholars are speculating because they don't really know, the people who built Gilgal Refaim and all of the dolmens that are found in the Golan Heights and east of the Jordan River, down from as far as Mount Hermon all the way down to the Dead Sea. The people who built those things didn't leave any inscriptions to explain what they were doing, which is kind of puzzling because certainly the Amorites knew how to read and write. They adopted Akkadian when they moved into Sumer and used Sumerian as the lingua franca until, all the way down till the time that Aramaic kind of took over. Akkadian became the diplomatic language. But the Amorites were essentially the dominant people in the ancient Near East from the time of Abraham, at least down to the time of the Exodus. So if they had been the ones who had done it even prior to 2000 BC, they certainly didn't inscribe anything on any of these dolmens, and there are like 25,000 of them. In fact, the only one I know of that where anything was inscribed on the inside was just recently discovered on the Golan with the capstone. This is one of those little trilithon-style dolmens with the two standing slabs and then a big tabletop slab across the top. And the top slab, they estimated about 50 tons. And all that they found are like one marking on the inside, like repeated like 14 times. It looks like a trident, like the Greek character, was it Phi? Or like the logo for Indiana University. And that's it. I mean, so what are these things for? We don't know. I've talked to the scientific director for the dig at Tal El Hammam, which is probably the site of ancient Sodom. And there are 1,500 or were 1,500 dolmens clustered at the base of that mound, oriented toward what they think was the temple in Sodom, which is intriguing. But they believe that the dolmen style funerary monument was used to deflesh the body, and then the bones were collected and given sort of a ceremonial burial inside the dolmens later on. But what were those tumuli for on top of those cairns on top of the Serpent Mound? We don't know. I mean, my guess would be that it was a place that was considered sacred to something that was represented by the serpent. And again, this brings us back to the Nakash and the Seraphim.
In that paper, they cite not just burial mounds on top of the Serpent Mound, but they actually have, I think it's 5 different dwellings. Mm-hmm. So it seems like they were actually living on top of this mound. So I don't know if there's some kind of a relationship between housing and the dead and like looking over them or, presiding in some way, or I don't know if it would be religious sites that they were, or if they were actual houses or whatever, but I don't know, Judd, if you have any thoughts about that.
That could certainly be a possibility. I mean, there are a number of cultures in the ancient Near East and the Mediterranean basin, who literally, in some cases, literally buried their dead under the floorboards of their house.
Well, that was the typical Amorite custom.
That's right. That's the one that I was thinking of. But, there are variations on that theme, all throughout that region. And as I said, the Eastern Mediterranean. So that could very well be. Of course, that's a tradition that goes back to prehistory. We were talking about Göbekli Tepe a minute ago. The same kind of thing, the association with the dead happened there. You could make the same argument for the Natufians at Jericho and Tel Caramel, Chatal Hayuk in Turkey. There are a number of these prehistoric proto-civilizations or civilizations that did this. And of course, in the historic period, there's a profusion of them. The placation of the dead ancestors and dead kings and warriors. This was something that was constantly on the minds of ancient peoples.
You're bringing up the Amorites, and for the audience, it's worth mentioning that Og and Sion are both called Amorites in the biblical text. And
Og also called the last of the remnant of the Rephaim. And
right, exactly.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, you've got and by the time of Moses and the Israelites, if Og was the last of the remnant of the Rephaim, they were considered living tribes in the days of Abraham 400 years earlier, when the kings from the east had to come through the Amorite tribes in the Transjordan, the lands of Bashan Ammon, Moab, and Edom before they could get to the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah. But when you read that account in Genesis 14 a little more carefully, which is interesting, you see that that the kings from the east went as far south as the tip of the Red Sea. They basically fought Amorites down there, or was it Amalekites down there, and then they came up the west side of the Dead Sea. They fought Amorites at what is now En-Gedi. So it's like they made a police action and circled around the Dead Sea and then fought the coalition, Sodom, Gomorrah, and their allies, at the north end of the Dead Sea again, which makes sense if Tal El Hammam, which is across from Jericho, east of the Jordan River, across from Jericho, was the location of Sodom. You see, I've seen a number of maps, and I was frustrated in trying to find one that I could use for our video, our film. I think I'm going to have to give that up. A lot of people trying to figure out, okay, if they went down here and then they went back here, because the assumption has always been that the kings of the east, or the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, were located south and east of the Dead Sea. The root of the kings of the east makes more sense if you place that coalition in the north end of the Dead Sea, in that plain, that fertile plain north of the Dead Sea. But again, you're getting into this link between the Rephaim and the Amorites, because by the time of Moses, again, Og was the only one left. And isn't it interesting that God directed Moses and the Israelites to take out Og first, because walking from the crossing to get over to Jericho up to the region of Bashan and then having to march back again, that probably added 4 or 5 weeks to their journey, not counting the time it took to fight Og and Sihon and his people. There was a reason God wanted them taken out first. And the book that Sharon and I have coming out, Veneration, deals with this cult of the dead that was part of the culture of the Amorites and had been for at least 1,000 years by the time of the Exodus. It's something that the prophets pick up later on. Isaiah in particular is very critical of the cults of the dead, worshiping in sacrificing in gardens and eating pig's flesh and so on. And it all seems to come back to this this veneration of the mighty men who were of old. And for people who aren't not clear on the connection, Rephaim, simply another name for the spirits of the Nephilim,
who are found, by the way, in Isaiah and Ezekiel and the Proverbs in hell. Like, that's where they reside.
Right. And in Ezekiel, was it 32? It's really an interesting chapter in which they're given sort of a pride of place. They're in the midst of Sheol, where the Assyrians, who had destroyed the northern kingdom not long before Isaiah's time, or not long before Ezekiel's time either, the Assyrians, they're off on the edges of Sheol. It's like they're hardly worth mentioning. So again, this mound, Doug, describe it again. You say that the mound itself rises a good 20, 25 feet above the. Yeah,
it depends on where you're at. Like when you walk straight from the wheel over to the mound, it's, I would say, maybe 20 feet. If you go to the west side of it, it seems to be significantly higher. So it's almost like they constructed it so that it would be level and flat on the top, whereas the land below it isn't quite that way. So you can get it. It seems like it was really dark when we were driving out. But it seems like that western side of it was significantly higher from the ground to the top of the thing than it was in the middle. That even adds to the idea that it's man-made in my mind even more. And when you look at it, like width-wise, it seems to be on Google Earth, it's between 200 and 300 feet. And really the only variation of that is the 300 feet's more in the center. And that's kind of where some of those biggest mounds are. So other than that, it's much more along the lines of 200 feet in width. It looks like it's about 3/4 of a mile long. So it's a gigantic feature. And if it's man-made, I mean, I can't imagine how long it would take to dig that much dirt and stack it up to create something that's that long and that wide and that high.
Yeah, I didn't have a real sense of scale, but remembering how big Gilgal Refaim is, which is, what, a couple hundred feet across, several hundred feet across?
Yeah, it's like 500 feet across. I mean, this thing...
Okay, so you're right. This is a couple hundred feet wide, and oh my gosh. That's bigger than I realized. I can't believe we drove.
It's absolutely huge.
Well, I'm looking at the little road path that we, road in name only, actually, that we took to get to the wheel. And we drove right. Well, I was on the right side of the Jeep, so I guess I wouldn't have noticed it when we were driving in. But driving out, you'd think, hey, look over there. See those piles of rocks on top of that hill that's sticking out of the ground. Maybe you should look at. No, none of us were just like, wow, that Gilgal Refaim was pretty cool.
Yeah, this thing has, it really does seem like it has completely escaped the notice of archaeologists. They're excited about finding dwellings and finding burial mounds, but this idea that you could actually find some sort of a gigantic, bigger mound that would be ceremonial, like what you find in Ohio. And apparently there was another serpent mound that was up in northern England at one point in time that has since been destroyed, but it's like this is not unprecedented in other parts of the world to find this.
No, not at all. I mean, there are these kinds of burials exist all over the world. And some, in all kinds of forms. I mean, they're usually associated with totemism, and so these theriomorphic or animal shaped mounds are often reflective of the beliefs of the peoples that built them, which, again, if we're looking at something that's Rephaim construction here, I think that's pretty significant.
Yeah, just using Google Maps to measure the distance from one end to the other, we're looking at it easily 3/4 of a mile.
Yeah.
And that's a straight line. That's not counting the curves or anything. So it's at least 3,700 feet long.
Yeah, you'd think that if you straighten the thing out, it would be closer to a mile.
Yeah, boy, that is
it's an astonishing achievement.
Yeah.
There's no other way to describe it.
Because as much rock as was moved to create Gilgal Refaim, is it basically a big pile of rocks, or can you tell when you're on top of it? Is it
no, just you can't tell. It seems to. Because there's too much overgrowth of weeds and grass and stuff. So, like, is it made of rock or is it dug out and made of dirt? I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean that's the question too. I mean, obviously there's been a certain amount of archaeology that's been conducted on there, but at lower depths, what are you going to find? I mean, typically barrows have not just not the sorts of grave inclusions that you would expect, like remains and bones and things like that, but there are all kinds of trinkets and fetishes and who knows. It just seems like the surface has barely been scratched on this.
Yeah. Well, this is truly a mystery. It's something that we intend to go back and see. We've got a query out to the tour company that will be taking us back out there next October, and hopefully we can get out there and perhaps get some drone footage. And I understand, Doug, you've been doing some photography out there yourself.
Well, not me, but a group that I went out with.
Okay,
we got some good drone footage of the Serpent Mound, so I'm excited to see it.
Cool. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
High 4K definition.
This, is phenomenal. So I will include some pictures with the show notes at VFTB.net. Do check it out, and you'll also see at least some shots from the ground across the top of this toward Mount Hermon when our video of our tour of Israel is finally released. It should be within the next month or so.
Yeah, if you want to upload that picture I sent you last night, I think I sent you a picture of looking at Hermon from the wheel, which would show right where it would show you the Serpent Mound. If I sent that to you, feel free to share it with your audience.
Absolutely. It's again, this is fascinating because it is right there. I mean, fascinating enough that we get something like this here in the United States in Ohio. But when you're connecting something like this to this particular location in a place that is just electric with theological and spiritual connotations, it is just jaw-dropping to stumble onto something like this. And then, of course, like I said, find out about 20 minutes later, it's like, oh, okay, well, somebody else got there first. But hey, at least I know that guy. So, but yes, we hope we can get out there, and I'm going to do a little more research. It would be hard to imagine that somebody else hasn't stumbled on this yet, but I would suspect that archaeologists who are very, very cautious about attaching their name to anything that might be considered fringe might just be very judicious in how they describe this thing. I found that to be the case when I was doing some research into head shaping. There are a few papers out there, but the scholars are very, very careful about, okay, we're not saying that this was, in fact, they're very cautious to kind of dance around the subject. Like, why would anybody want to do that to their children? And why was it done for so many thousands of years? And why does it all seem to originate at a city called Eridu, which just happened to be the location of the temple called the House of the Abyss? Well, I have no PhD, so I'm free to speculate.
Well, I've got one, and I do it all the time.
And that's why you're a regular on this program, Judd. That's why we're proud to call you our friend. Fascinating. We're going to leave it here, but we are definitely not going to leave this subject alone. Doug Van Dorn, author of the book Giants, Sons of the Gods, and you'll find him and all of his work, including the OG blog, at dougvandorn.com. And Dr. Judd Burton, author of Interview with the Giant, the Nephilim Dossier. You'll find his websites at burtonbeyond.com and tioba.org for the Institute of Biblical Anthropology. Gentlemen, enjoyed the conversation, and we'll have to do this again as more information comes to light.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Doug Van Dorn and Dr. Judd Burton and the Serpent Mound of Bashan. This needs to be more widely known than it is. Like I said, I think there's got to be somebody out there who's done some academic work on this and just didn't want to be considered a kook and maybe hasn't made it as popular as it is. I guarantee you, though, if we really make this a big deal, the Ancient Aliens guys will be all over it. Well, we are going back to Israel, and we're going to see that thing next October. You can join us. We'll tell you how, and a few other places we're going to be in the very near future when A View from the Bunker continues. Straight ahead.
Jack the Ripper's dark deeds actually began long before 1888. And it wasn't a mere man who committed the crimes, but a demon in league with devilish men, a group of men called Red Wing. Only one small group of valiant men and women stand against this evil, a group that place their faith in Christ alone. And they protect a secret of blood that Red Wing hopes to use to usher in the reign of Antichrist and the end of day.
Red Wing is called Red Wing because they want to kill the church. They want to forever stop Christ from coming back. So it's the Holy Spirit, the dove, with a murdered, has been slain, a wounded dove. Ultimately, we still have to remember that the one who is in control is God Almighty, and we have to go to Him, and we have to suit up every time we go out.
The Red Wing Saga by Sharon K. Gilbert. Book 1. Blood Lies. Book 2. Blood Rights. Book 3. The Blood is the Life. Book 4. Realms of Stone. And now available Book 5. Realms of Fire. Available at SkyWatchTVstore.com. Paperback and Kindle at Amazon.com. Characters you'll love and a story you can't put down. The Red Wing Saga by Sharon K. Gilbert.
Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
Talking the Walk every Sunday night. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Sharon's next novel, Realms of the Dead, is about to drop imminently. I'll tell you about that in just a minute. And the first book that we've written together called Veneration. Yeah, we'll talk about that here in just a minute. A couple of places we're going to be in the very near future. As you're hearing this on October 13th, 2019, assuming that you're listening to it the night that it's released, and, you know, why wouldn't you? We are wrapping up the Hear the Watchman conference Disclosure on the Coast out in Orange County, California. So a little late for you to travel for that, but not too late to sign up for streaming video so you can catch all of the presentations, including a discussion of my most recent book, Bad Moon Rising, Islam, Armageddon, and the Most Diabolical Double Cross in History. Other speakers, L.A. Marzulli, Carl Teichrieb, Josh Peck from SkyWatchTV, his co-author Stephen Bankars on the Second Coming of the New Age, the best-selling co-authors of The Babylon Code and Trumpocalypse, Troy Anderson and Paul McGuire, Pastor Phil Court, Michael Boldea, Gans Shimura of Canary Cry Radio and the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. So some excellent information coming out of this conference in Orange County. If you missed it, you haven't missed it, because you can still sign up for streaming video. You've got access to it for 6 months. And when you do, you get access to a second conference free. It's a 2-for-1 deal from Hear the Watchman. And if you use the promo code Gilbert20, Gilbert20, you save another 20%. 2 conferences, price of 1, watch in HD from the comfort of your own home. And you get another 20% off just for using the promo code Gilbert20. Don't miss the deal. HearTheWatchmen.com. HearTheWatchmen.com. Next April, we travel to Scotland. We're returning to Scotland, and we're really looking forward to it. Scotland is a beautiful, beautiful country, and we pray that this conference, the first ever Scottish Bible Prophecy Conference, will be the start of something, a revival, perhaps, or if not revival, then at least some more interest in the Bible and the history in the Bible, the archaeology of the Holy Land, which to me are the rocks crying out. So we're looking forward to bringing some powerful messages, Sharon and me, along with Pastor Billy Crone and Jim Barfield, director of the Copper Scroll Project, to talk about what treasures, temple treasures, Solomon's temple, might be buried at Qumran. And evangelist Stephen Wright, crossing over from Ireland. We will be in Scotland April 24th through 26th at Walker Hall in Troon. That's near Glasgow. It's in Ayrshire. It's on the coast. Beautiful location. And again, we'll be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, April 24th through 26th. The Scottish Bible Prophecy Conference. For more information, check the link in the right-hand sidebar at vftb.net. Under events, you'll find it in there on the calendar. It's a very long and complicated URL, but we'll get you there if you follow the links. The Defender Conference, Skywatch TV, is doing it again, moving to late August 2020, August 28th through 30th. This will be at the Chateau on the Lake in Branson. It's an absolutely gorgeous location, overlooks Table Rock Lake. I can vouch for the natural beauty of Table Rock Lake. We live about 6 miles from the lake ourselves here in the Ozarks. Tom Horn will be speaking in 2020. He did not speak at this year's conference. He's at a point in his life he'd just rather not, just step aside, make way for the young kids like Josh Peck and Stephen Bankars, guys like that. But Tom will be speaking at this conference with a very powerful message. Alveda King, the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King, one of the featured speakers. Rabbi Jonathan Kahn will be there as well. Dr. Michael Heiser coming back next year. Pastor Carl Gallups will be there. Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis. Yaakov Buyans, producer of the film 8 Days, a very powerful statement against human trafficking. Those are the confirmed speakers so far. So more to come as we get closer to that date. But it's not too early to make your plans and make your reservations, because this year's conference sold out in 5 days. So don't miss it. The Defender Conference, August 28th through 30th of 2020 at the Chateau on the Lake in Branson, Missouri. Okay, Sharon's new novel, Realms of the Dead, Book 6 of the Red Wing Saga. It's part of a new package being offered through SkyWatch TV, along with our first book co-authored together called Veneration, Unveiling. Oh, now I've forgotten the subtitle. Unveiling, Demonic Kings of Antiquity and Satan's Battle Plan for Armageddon. It deals with the cult of the dead from the ancient world. The Amorites, the Canaanites who lived around ancient Israel, venerating the dead, and especially the kings of old. The Rephaim, the Nephilim, was part of their worldview. And it's referenced more places in the Bible than we've been taught. It's all about our destiny as humans in being restored to God's holy mountain and being restored to the divine council. That book those books together will be released at the end of the month. Not coincidentally, timed to coincide with Halloween. So be watching for those programs on the 2 books coming out on Skywatch TV beginning today, October 13th. So the next 3 programs at Skywatch TV, online, skywatchtv.com. You'll find the programs there, and again, a special offer from Skywatch TV on the new book, Veneration. The cover art by Jeffrey Martis, absolutely stunning. For both books, actually, because he did the cover for Realms of the Dead as well. So hopefully you can take advantage of it, and I think you'll find some new information, but also some encouragement here. Because ultimately, the fallen realm, the infernal council, if you will, tried to copy or hijack God's plan of redemption for you and me. And all through history, all through the Bible, we see Jesus, as Mike Heiser wrote in his book, Reversing Hermon, reversing the evil that they intended for us. God has turned it for good. That's the whole point of the book, Veneration, coming out end of the month from Defender Publishing. Our tour of Israel, October 12th through 25th of 2020. We visit the weird sites that most other tours won't go to. It's a little more physically challenging, but it is so worth it. Gilgal Refaim, definitely on the tour, and that Serpent Mound, now that we know that it's there, likewise, also on the tour. We are going to compel our guides to take us. We'll also see places that most tours won't visit because they're in what the world calls the West Bank. That's Judea and Samaria to you and me, and that's where 80% of Bible history took place. So, if you don't go to Judea and Samaria, you miss out on places like Shiloh and Bethel and the altar of Joshua. That was discovered by archaeologist Adam Zertal about 40 years ago. We were there this year, and that is a powerful thing you do not want to miss. The Skywatch TV Tour of Israel, October 12th through 25th of 2020. The extension, by the way, going to Sardinia to see the megalithic sites there. For more information and to put down a deposit to reserve your place, log on to lipkintours.com, Lipkin, lipkintours.com. If you get a spare moment, sure appreciate a review. It helps push this humble podcast offering a little higher in the ratings and at rankings in iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever else you find us, which is, of course, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Give our Facebook page a like, a thumbs up. And remember, A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Whatever that means. The opening theme is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod, his website, incompetech.com. Our opening announcer, DC Good. And he is good. Oh, coming up, well, going to grab some interviews, I believe, at these conferences over the next couple of weeks, because we're going to be gone more than we're home. So if I don't, well, we got no shows for the 20th or the 27th. Our October 27th show, that's going to be Dr. Judd Burton. Sort of a tradition here at A View from the Bunker. We talk about All Hallows Eve and what it means for us as Christians. So, we appreciate you tuning in. And remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.